Good afternoon, Panther fans. Welcome to the Four-Man Rush. I'm your main man, Kevin Avery, a.k.a. 4MR_Country Kev on Twitter. Coming with you today, I got a longtime friend of the Four-Man Rush and a personally good friend of mine as well. Many of you guys who follow on Twitter see him all the time. He has probably some of the best film evaluation breakdowns, player scheme and fits for the Panthers. Anybody I've seen here. So I want to welcome back to the show, Jared Finberg here. Jared, welcome back. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing good. I just got done with the workout, so I'm just fresh off the treadmill, fresh off doing arms and shoulders. So if I'm looking a little groggy, it's because of that. I'm a little tired, but we're pushing through. We're going to do some good things here this afternoon.
Yeah, I still got on my workout clothes. I didn't have no time to get a quick bird shower and throw on some Panther gear. So, yeah, I'm walking the post Planet Fitness workout gear look myself.
Nice, very nice.
All right. So, Jared, let our fans know exactly where it is that they can find you at on Twitter, and if you got anything going on that they should know about.
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter at JRodNFLDraft. You can also find me if you have the platform or if you have an account on the platform. You can find me on Threads at the same handle at JRodNFLDraft. You can find most of my content over at Cat Crave and also Rigo's Rag, where I do most of my draft and Panthers content. I did some Commanders content over the draft process. Kind of wanted to venture out a little bit, see what the Commanders were going to do for this process. Kind of give Commander fans my perspective from the outside looking in. So it was nice to be an outsider for this entire process with Commander fans, but my home is with Panther fans, of course, and it was while there were times where sometimes this fan base kind of got on my nerves a little bit. Not gonna lie, it was a joy to have good conversations and arguments about the draft process overall, and I really enjoyed my time talking to Panther fans and you as well, Kevin, you, Monty, JD, and also shout out to my colleague and friend Ricky Rains. He did a great job at the Draft Carolina event the other day or last week, and couldn't be more prouder of my good friend and colleague. So make sure you guys give him a follow as well. One of the best Panthers guys out there.
Hey, great. And I'm glad to know that those Washington Commander fans treated you with grace and dignity, because we don't want to have to, go up there and smack folks around, Panther Twitter. When you mess with Jared, you're going to get the full nasty pettiness that Panthers Twitter can provide. So, you F around and find out messing with Jared. So we just going to leave it at that. Yep. So, hey, man, let's jump right into this here. So,
sure.
As everybody know by now, the long-awaited NFL draft has came and went. The Carolina Panthers came in, I believe, with 6 draft picks, but we ended up leaving with 7 players. Of course, these draft picks have been widely discussed, but I wanted to bring you in, Jared, because, like I said, you have a very unique perspective. You will like certain players, but you also fair in your critiquing from your vantage point on what you see as a strength, what they need to work on, if they're a good fit. So I wanted to let the fans know in advance that, we're going to break down each one of the players drafted here today, since I got a little bit of time here with you, and just to see, how they possibly could fit from what we know about what the 2024 Carolina Panthers going to look like. So let's start off with our first round pick. Now, again, coming into the draft, we didn't have one. Jared, I was about to go to bed when I saw the notification that the Carolina Panthers had traded into the first round. So I immediately woke up and wanted to say, like, okay, what do we do? What do we give up to move up to the first round? I'm like, it was only, one spot since we had the 33rd overall pick, but came to find out Jared, as you probably already know, Brandon Beane, general manager for the Buffalo Bills, looked out for Dan Morgan, did him a solid. Come to find out that the New England Patriots called and wanted to move into that spot. They wanted to grab a receiver. It was come to find out that they actually had eyes on it, Xavier Legette as well. So, they got a deal done in about 10 minutes. We got the pick, and we ended up drafting South Carolina wide receiver Xavier Legette here. Now, from what I've seen on the film, as you know, following my other Foreman Rush brothers, it's been talked about in great length. What type of role do you see Xavier Legette playing based on what you know and gathered about the type of offensive scheme that Coach Canales is going to run here in 2024?
I think you're going to see Legette be a rotational starter overall as a NFL draft, or not an NFL draft, overall as one of the Panthers star receivers. Sorry, I heard something go off in the background. When I watched Legette's film, I saw someone that can be a true future X, but also right now where he wins in the big slot, moving him around alignments, playing him as the flanker Z spot. You're going to see Legette moved around a good bit, and I think that's what you're going to see early on in his career. I do expect him to start a few games. I do expect him to have a significant role in the team. However, there are some production expectations that I'm not totally on board with. I think when we consider guys like Legette and considering the situation in Carolina, considering the type of player he is, I think it's reasonable to think he will hit well over 500 yards receiving. I think his threshold is anywhere between 600 to 800 yards receiving on the year, with about 5 to 7 touchdowns overall. And I don't think that's bad production for a rookie wide receiver. And when it comes to Legette, you're going to get a good player after the catch, as well as someone that's going to win at the catch point consistently and very well. I think one of the things that obviously everyone knows that Legette needs to work on is his consistency as a route runner. But he's not going to win with incredible twitch and short area quickness. That's not his game. Legette's going to win a little bit more with more physicality, but he will need some extra steps when running some routes, such as comeback routes. He'll need to take a few extra steps to gather himself, control and sink his hips, come back to the football. It's going to take him a few extra steps. And it kind of reminds me back to when DK Metcalf was being drafted out, Ole Miss. There were so many narratives around Metcalf as a prospect. He wasn't a good route runner. He was this, he was that. And Metcalf ended up being one of the better receivers in the league. He's easily, I think, a top 15, top 20 receiver in this game. And at his very best, he is no doubt a top 10 receiver in the league, in my opinion. And there was a point in time where Metcalf was at that level of play. He was a top 10 receiver at one point. I think Legette could get to that point. Is he going to be the next all-time great receiver? It's too early to say. What he will be early on is I think at worst, a number 3 receiver on the team. You're going to see Legette behind, at least in terms of production, Adam Thielen and Deontay Johnson, production-wise. I think early on, and I saw Monty and JD bringing this up, or someone on Twitter, that Mingo might end up starting over Legette early on. I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case, because Mingo will have more experience. However, all that is up in the air. We don't really know what Carolina is truly going to do with some of these other receivers like Mingo and Legette. And there's this narrative that Legette is Mingo 2.0, but their games are totally different. And it's on the film too. They're two very different players. Legette, I think, is more Metcalf. Mingo, don't really have a player comparison off the top of my head, but Mingo, I think you're going to see him win more vertically against man coverage. And we saw the flashes of that last year. And of course, Bryce Young did struggle a little bit throwing the deep ball. There was some deep ball inaccuracies when trying to push the ball downfield. That needs to be tightened up. And Bryce understands that. Dave Canales understands that. Brad Isaac knows that as well, the offensive coordinator. So I do like the Legette pick. I will say and push back on some people saying, "Oh, you thought every pick in this draft was solid." I just think of what I see. I see Legette as a solid pick for Carolina. I did have other preferences. I do wish they could have taken Keon Coleman over Legette. He was my wide receiver 5 on my board. I wish they could have taken Adonai Mitchell. He was my wide receiver 4. But it didn't seem like Carolina was interested in Mitchell whatsoever. And then, of course, Jalen Polk, who I was very high on during the process, along with my good friend Ricky Raines. There were other preferences I had, of course, but that didn't mean I thought Legette was a bad player. Legette was 2 points off from having a first-round grade, and he was my 10th ranked receiver in this draft class. Okay. Which just goes to tell you how deep this group is. So, and I wrote an article about this, I think at the beginning of April, that the Panthers weren't going to make a bad selection with whoever they took at wide receiver early on, because there were a lot of good receiver prospects available, and that was the case. And they loved to look at throughout the entire process, and it just seemed like it was inevitable. Probably during the first week or the week of the draft, that it just seemed very inevitable that Legette was going to be a Panther one way or another. And shout out to the Bills for kind of giving Carolina a little bit of some info about New England, who they're looking for, and also acquiring that 5th-year option. That's a big deal, because got time to consider. All right, if Legette is playing up to expectations throughout his rookie contract, ends up being a key piece of the offense for the years to come, or he's getting to that point, Carolina has a little bit of a buffer if they want to re-sign him or they don't want to re-sign him. So this is a solid draft pick right now. I do want to see how it turns out, because I think there is a plan in place for how Legette will be used. I think he'll be used similar to how he was at South Carolina. And if that's the case, I do expect him to be pretty productive, but probably in my mind, productive is more, like I was saying earlier, 600 to 800 yards receiving. It's 5 to 7 touchdowns, not 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns and 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns. I'm just like, I mean, hey, if Legette has those numbers, hallelujah, hell yeah, I'm all in. But I'd rather keep my expectations tempered, see how things go. And I do hope for the best with Legette. I really do. I hope this offense takes a significant step forward. But I think it's reasonable to keep expectations tempered with Legette going forward.
Yeah, excellent points, Jared, because like you, I've seen a lot of these unrealistic expectations. It's almost as if, if you're wide receivers, particularly selected in the first round, you automatically got to get 1,000 yards. It's kind of like this, what the new status quo is. But I think you made some good points, because I saw where it said in Tampa last year. Now, I don't know how much it hold true. Canales likes to use 11 personnel. It said about 70% of the time. And I believe last year, up under Frank Reich and Thomas Brown, we was in it about 90, 92% of the time. It was I think we led the league, in
11 personnel. Yeah,
yes.
It was absolutely insane how much they were using 11 personnel, when there were some points where it was like, okay, I understand using 11 personnel in this situation, but using it almost every down.
Yes.
I'm just like, and I get like Bryce Young needs to have the field kind of spread out a little bit, but that much, that often, I think you and I both agree there was nothing going right with that offense whatsoever. Any first down was a victory.
Yes.
Any first down. So, like you were mentioning, the amount of 11 personnel usage, I do think you're going to see a little bit less of, but I think you'll see still plenty of it. There will be a little bit more mixture in formations or in terms of personnel usage.
Yeah, because across the NFL as a whole, I think 11 personnel is the new base offense. Pretty much what you see. Me, I'm a fan. I got nothing wrong with 11. Like I say, depending on down and distance and matchups. I'm a fan of multiple tight end sets. Like 12 personnel. Definitely, 22 personnel, 13 personnel. Because I feel like the type of tight ends that we got, we could be a little bit more tight end centered at times. We'll get into when we get down. We can talk more about that a little bit later when we get to our 4th round pick. But yeah, I just would like to see more of the personnel usage, more spread it out, because it just seemed like the Panthers offense was so predictable. When he came out, and things like that. So as Canales and Isaac are designing the playbook offensively, I'm definitely hoping that we're going to see some differences. I even heard Canales mention about that when they was drafting 2nd round pick Brooks, that they're even looking at some empty sets and things of that nature. So it'd definitely be interesting to see. But speaking of Brooks, who was our 2nd round pick, now I'm gonna be honest with you, Jared, because you my boy. I like to keep it real with you. I really wasn't a fan of trading down and then trading back up to get him, because it's just for me. It's the fact that, for one, Trey Benson was out there, who didn't go to pick number 66, which was the top of the 3rd round, who was healthy all last year, and I felt like was equally as good as a healthy Brooks. Now, with me saying all that, please don't take it. I am not anti-Brooks by no means, stretch of imagination. Prior to him getting the ACL tear, he could have a say-so, had a case for being the best running back in the country. But like I said, I just wasn't a fan of what we gave up to get him. Kind of felt like, from my perspective, we could have stayed and still got him. But hey, we don't know what they heard behind the scenes. Heard that Jerry Jones was lurking and wanted to get him. So hey, if they feel like Brooks is the fit for what they want to do, we got him. No complaints. I just want to get that out the way. But based on the film, he's had a fun film to watch since we drafted him. I try to look for what I can see on what he needs to improve on. I'm a trench guy, so my eyes on skilled players may not be as trained as you guys yet. So that's why I definitely want you to come in and point out things. But it's rumored that Canales is a wide zone scheme. I'm not sure what type of offense they ran at Texas, but I definitely saw some zone plays in his highlights. And I'm like, okay, I can see the vision. I can see why they took him. But tell me, in your evaluation post-draft of Brooks, tell me what it is, Jonathan Brooks, what it is that you see in him that you think that he could possibly, and I cautiously say possibly, be the feature back here in Carolina in a year or two.
Yeah, so to start off, let's talk about the pick itself. And personally, like, I get if you have a conviction for a player, and this can go for Legette as well. If you have a conviction for a player, you go get him. And I think that was the mindset for Dan Morgan and Dave Canales. If you really like this player and you want to jump ahead of a team that probably would have taken him, such as Dallas Cowboys, for example, you go and get him. At first, I did like the trade back. You gained a 2nd round pick for next year. That is huge. And that allows you to be a little bit more aggressive next offseason, assuming Carolina is going in the right track this upcoming season. They have a better than expected season. They're in a good position to start competing in the division, or at least for an NFC South title and for the NFC playoffs in general. They have a chance to be true contenders in that conference overall. They become a little bit aggressive next season. Go up and get someone they like in the draft, or use another first round pick to go get someone that they like overall in the league in general. Like if there was someone on the franchise tag next year that they really liked, go out and go get them. You have that first round pick. You have that second round pick to fall back on. So there is positivity in trading back, but then you trade up. And I get why people are kind of upset of trading up for one, a player with or a player that is playing at a devalued position, and two, a player that's coming off a torn ACL. And I do think a lot of Panther fans are saying, we like the player. We just don't like the process of how it got to that. They could have taken Brooks early in that draft or early in the second round. They could have. They very much could have. And I think that should have been the case. However, losing my train of thought. When Brooks coming out, he didn't even participate in the process or even any of the combine stuff. You didn't get to see really that athleticism on film. Or at least out there, like relative athletic score, you didn't really get to see that. Still, he's on track to be back for July, which is great, right before training camp. So he'll be ready for the start of July, in time for the start of training camp, get to see his skill set. Brooks is a good player, and I liked him coming out. I thought he was RB2 in this class behind Trey Benson. I probably would have preferred Benson over Brooks just because he's healthier. He has definitely a lot more production on tape. And also, I just thought he was just a naturally just overall better player. But Brooks is just as good of a player, in my opinion. Brooks offers that 3-down versatility that you want at the running back position. There's a little bit of some inconsistencies as a route runner, but that can be ironed out over time. But he has some of the best hands of any running back in this draft class. He has some of the best pass protection skills overall in this draft class at the position, which is very important. And especially when you want to protect Bryce Young, you need a running back that can pass pro very well. And overall as a runner, he's one of the better ones out there. Very adequate vision, good short area quickness, great explosiveness. Though he does lack a little bit of a third gear, I don't think he has that runaway speed you want. Or maybe some may want, but some others are like, as long as he's incredibly explosive, which he is, that's good enough for me. You see the vision, you see the balance, contact balance, you see the leg churn, you see the effort. I'll give one example of effort and just head up awareness. Against Alabama, I'm trying to remember which quarter it was. It might have been the third quarter, maybe the fourth. It was a 4th and short. I'm pretty sure it was late in the game, 4th and short. And Ewers, I think, fumbles the ball at the snap. It's like 4th and inches. So basically the line of scrimmage and the first down marker are basically the size of my laptop. So you have that much to get for a first down, essentially. And Ewers fumbles, but it takes a lucky bounce behind him. And Brooks heads up awareness, picks it up, chugs forward, gets a first down. Hits, I think, the A gap, and A gap had no one there. Everyone was attacking not the A gap, C gap. Everyone was attacking the A gap because Ewers is there. Ball is loose. No one's really paying attention. Brooks picks it up, takes it through the C gap, gets a first down. So just that type of stuff, I think, kind of gives Carolina, you see that heads up awareness, see a little bit awareness overall in his game. He's a good player. Scheme versatile. You're going to get someone that can play both in zone blocking scheme and man blocking scheme. If Carolina wants to run power, they can run power with Jonathan Brooks. They want to run wide zone, they can run wide zone with Jonathan Brooks. Now, is Brooks going to be the starter week 1? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think there's definitely a transition period. And I do think fans sometimes lose focus of the transition period that a lot of these rookies have. This isn't Madden where you can just pop a player in and they go out and ball out. In some ways, Madden's the same way as it is in real life in that aspect of the transition. They start out as a lower overall player, and then they grow as the season goes along. I think that would be the same case for Brooks and also Legette. Brooks will likely be RB2. I think he'll be RB2 in this offense. I don't think Miles Sanders makes the final 53.
Okay.
That's my bold prediction for training camp. He does not make the 53. I think Brooks and Sanders are similar players, but I think Brooks offers a lot better vision right now and also better third down ability than Sanders. And I think that'll be the difference. And I'm sure Carolina I don't think Carolina had an issue with taking up a ton of dead cap space over the offseason. So I don't think they're going to have an issue moving on from Sanders. I think the overall running back room, it'll be Hubbard, Brooks, and then Blackshear as your number 3.
Yes.
I think Blackshear's his value as a return man, either as a kick or a punt returner, is very valuable. And I think he does offer a skill set that allows him to be a change of pace back for this offense. I think that would be crucial for Canellis. Is Brooks the most powerful running back? No. But does he have enough leg churn and contact balance to win in man blocking schemes? Absolutely. You can run him on poles, power, trap, whatever. You have the freedom to use him like you want to use him. So I like the Brooks pick. I don't like the process it took to get there, but you're surrounding Bryce Young with talent. I think that's the big thing here, is that for the first or 3 of the first 4 draft picks, you're surrounding Bryce Young with playmakers. That's important. And I think Carolina has done more for their rookie quarterback in one offseason than they did with Cam Newton during his 10, 11-year career in Carolina, which says a lot. Says a lot about the organization, says a lot about the team right now. So don't mean to talk about Cam Newton. I know there are some people that may not like when Panther fans bring up Cam Newton. He's gone from the team. Why are you still talking about him? Because there's so many what ifs about what could have happened if Cam Newton actually had good protection and play calling from the jump and throughout his entire career. Imagine where the Panthers would be right now if that were the case. We wouldn't be talking about having to continue to rebuild the team every year. So that's just my take on the Brooks. I don't mean to ramble, but, it is what it is.
No, you brought up some excellent points because, I'm on board with, because he is coming back from an ACL injury. And I know that he said that Brooks said that it was a blessing in disguise for him. I saw where he had mentioned that. So I'm looking at it as like gradually easing him into the workload. Let him take a few pops, let him get a few hits to see, how his confidence is, because with the ACL, it's more of a mental thing than a physical thing from what I've seen from players recovering. It's about having a confidence that the knee is going to hold up. It's going to do what you want it to do. You can stop, cut on a dime. And I think that the progression of modern medicine has really helped players come back better and stronger from an ACL. Once upon a time, an ACL was usually the death of a career for players, versus now, to ACL, you can be back in 6 to 8 months, depending on, the severity of it. But I definitely can see him gradually becoming the face, but I'm with you. I definitely don't think he starts at it, but at the same time, it's open competition. Let the best man win. I've grown to become a fan of Chuba Hubbard. I'm definitely a fan of Raheem Blackshear as well. I had just tweeted about him a couple of days ago, wondering if there's going to be a role for him. Don't get me wrong, I like Miles Sanders, but I don't have no attachment to him. So I think it was pointed out that when Dan Morgan was asked about Miles Sanders after the draft, his exact words was, all options are always on the table, but we're confident in Miles Sanders. Now, to me, Jared, that's telling me, hey, if somebody want him with a decent enough price, he's up out of here. But if not, we got to roll for him. He didn't immediately just cut it off. Like if someone would have said the same thing about Bryce, we're keeping all options. No, there's no options on the table when it comes to Bryce Young. So,
and I'll point this out too. Chuba Hubbard is in a contract year, and
yes,
there is that scenario where Hubbard does have a good season, earns a second contract with the team. But I don't see that as a bad thing. I see that as a good thing because you continue to surround Bryce with talent. You continue to keep those pieces around him. If it works, keep going and continue to progress. That's why you have a young talent and Brooks behind him potentially. And same thing at wide receiver. Legette doesn't need to be like an all-pro receiver in year one. Let him develop into a focal point of the offense if he can. I don't see. I get why some fans may not even like the pick overall or like the just Brooks in general, just because it's a running back, and also it wasn't a great running back class. But when watching Brooks's film, this is a player that's going to give you great contribution in year one and then become a potential full-time starter in year two. A workhorse back who can you can give him 20, 25 touches a game. That's the type of player Brooks can be. He's not Christian McCaffrey 2.0. I'll say that. He is definitely not McCaffrey 2.0. He is not Jonathan Stewart 2.0. It's not D'Angelo Williams 2.0. He is Jonathan Brooks 1.0. And we got to let him become his own player. So the first two picks I'm a fan of. There were two players I liked. Both had top 60 grades for me. So two day two prospects. Legette was a top 35 prospect for me. He was my 34th overall player. And it was good value in my opinion. For Legette at 32. And same thing with Brooks. Good value, but at the same time, it's a running back, torn ACL, turning up for a running back, giving up more draft capital. I get it.
Yeah, and Jared, I'm taking a quick look here. With this whole Miles Sanders thing. Now, you brought up, the dead cap and everything. I know you mentioned he would be cut. If cut before this season, his dead cap would be $10.4 million. However, if for whatever reason we decide to keep him but release him next year, it'll only be $2.9 million. So, yeah, there's room to absorb the dead cap, but I kind of want to see how he flourishes because when he was with the Eagles, and don't get me wrong, I know the Eagles' offensive line is significantly better all across the board than the Panthers. So let me preface that so people can understand that I'm realistic. But I feel like everybody that didn't do well in 2023 in the Panthers offense gets a restart. That's just how she's looking at it. Mingo, Sanders, because when it came out, and I don't know if you saw or heard about it, but it came out about a month or so ago that each week there was huge disagreements verbally between Frank Wright, Thomas Brown, and James Campen about what the weekly game plan should be every week going in. It was just like they wasn't on the same page. For example, it was brought up that the week one at Atlanta, that, we was in a lot of Bryce Young was in a lot of pistol formation and schemes. James Campen, had said that they didn't practice a lot. That's not what they practice too much of heading up into the week of. It would seem like whatever they practice, and then Frank Wright would just want to do something else because he was the play caller come game day. And I just think that would explain why, excuse my language, we saw a shit show offensively, about every week. Like, it was a prayer if we ever made 17, 20 points, throughout the 2023 season. But yeah, I kind of want to see if Miles Sanders, because I do think he's a good bat. We just see if he can do well with Canales, because there is this thing called, knock on wood, injuries. One hit to Chuba or Brooks, then we're going to be wishing we would have kept a Miles Sanders. So I'm open to it, but like I said, I'm not married to it. If they decide trade him, let him go, hey, I won't lose not an ounce of sleep over it, because I definitely like to see Blackshear, get some reps and things like that. I'm definitely a fan of his.
And as a disclaimer, I do hope that Sanders proves me wrong this upcoming season. I really do hope that he ends up having a much better year too in Carolina, because right now the contract just looks horrible. I mean, no matter how you put it, it's horrible. It's a bad contract. But I do think Sanders will get his opportunity. Brooks will too. There will definitely be a lot of competition behind Chuba Hubbard. I think everyone knows Hubbard's RB1, but who's going to be RB2? Is it going to be Brooks? Is it going to be Sanders? Hell, is it even going to be Blackshear? Could Blackshear out of nowhere become the number 2 back? And again, I'm like you. I'm not married to the idea. I could see it happening. I could see Sanders being moved on from during training camp or once the roster cuts come down. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the competition overall in that running back room.
Yeah, definitely, because I think that Canales would use running back by committee, at Tampa. So I've always been a fan of sharing the workload and things like that. The days of 25 carries for one back for the most part is pretty much over, unless you got a Derrick Henry or somebody. That's still now that there's no more hip drop tackle rules. I think he's going to be a nightmare to try to tackle in Baltimore. Good God, but
that's just that's not a fair fit. That I mean that in a good way. That's a hell of a fit, and that's just not fair. Same thing with Xavier Worthy. Like, he landed in the right spot for him to
God. Is that a cheat code, Jared? Because I was sitting there thinking, like, that's like a billionaire winning the Powerball. Like, like, you don't need no more money.
I mean, 2 years ago, they had Tyreek Hill. 2 years later, they get one of the fastest receivers to ever come through the draft, and a receiver that I think his tape is quite good. So he's not just a speed guy. He is a lot more than that. I think fans look at that 40 time like, oh, he's just a speed guy. He's another John Ross. No, this is a much different player. He
can run the route tree. He can run that route tree.
He can run the route tree and then some, and he can work after the catch, as we all know. So I'm ready to talk about Trevon Wallace, because I think this is probably the more controversial selection of this class.
Yeah, with Trevon Wallace selected in the 3rd round, that was my first time I said, who? Because I'm like, I was trying to remember if I even saw him as an option in my mock drafts. It was just like I really had to, do the general search. I like using Draft Network first as far as player evaluations and breakdown. I like those guys. I think they're pretty consistent, giving pros and cons to players. So I was like, okay, all right. But when I don't know if when you was watching the draft, if you heard Louis Riddick came out and said the term, this is an alpha dog. And immediately I'm like, okay, Dan Morgan said he wanted dogs, so I'm like,
this is a dog. I'll tell you this right now.
You go ahead and do your thing on Trevor, because I'm still learning about him. So put us on game.
So I did his pre-draft eval, gave him a 3rd round grade. I think he was right in the range where Carolina took him. Picked at 72. I had him as a player graded in the 80s. So it's not terrible value whatsoever, in my opinion, or at least in my eyes. He still had an early third round grade, but at least another 10 other guys at early third round grades. Like, it was overall, this class had a lot of depth and a lot of talent. But anyways, when I watched Wallace pre-draft, I was like, okay, it's very physical, nonstop motor, very athletic, just flashed at the Senior Bowl in coverage. Okay, all right. And I was impressed with his tape. I was like, could definitely be a target for Carolina, especially if they want to go defense with their second round selection, or if they want to go in the trade back scenario. They want to trade back from 65. Wallace would be a nice target. And look what happened. Wallace ended up being the pick at 72 in a trade back.
Okay.
So now I'm going through his film review, and I'm like, wow, I should have been a little bit higher on Wallace as a player. I do think that Wallace is a raw player, but I don't think this is DJ Johnson 2.0. But I never understood those initial comments. I think it was more people like, what was this pick? Who is this guy? Like, and I'll take responsibility for not bringing Wallace into the light a little bit more during the pre-draft process. That's on me. But looking at his tape right now during my film review, and I'm still going through it right now, this physical player, tenacious, like he flies around the field. I mean, the building blocks are there for him to be a good linebacker in this league, in my opinion. And I think sitting behind Shaq Thompson and Josie Jewell, well, figuratively sitting behind, it will allow him to develop as a player tremendously. And he's younger. He's a junior. He's 21 years old, or he will be 21 years old. Like, he's a younger player. So there's certainly a lot more room to grow. This isn't DJ Johnson, where he's 25 years old by the time he's drafted. This is a much younger player who has his best football ahead of him.
Definitely.
With Wallace, let me pull up my notes from his pre-draft eval. Some of the pros I had, he was explosive, had a lot of high energy, great foot speed and overall acceleration when moving all over the field. He has great hip flexibility and change of direction, and has the burst to recover his positioning on the field. So say he's dropping into hook curls and then play is going the other way, he has the ability to just flip his hips and go the other direction. He has a length to stack and shed blocks. There were flashes of that. I saw it against Alabama when Alabama came to Kentucky this past season. And Wallace did show the ability to stack his blockers and then shim them out of the way, kind of maintain a little bit of some gap integrity, especially as a second level defender. When he's coming downhill, he's getting up into blocks, flashing some of that gap integrity. And when I say he comes downhill, he comes downhill. He will attack with energy. He will just blow you up. When I saw some of those flashes, I'm like, you get him with a linebacker coach that can get him right and has shown to have good linebacker play from this position coach, I'm all in. I will say that, could there have been a more beneficial playmaker here at 72? Possibly. But I do think that Dan Morgan was going to come away with a linebacker no matter what in this draft, whether it was early, whether it was later. And I feel like Wallace, he has the physical tools. He shows some flashes on film. He is right now a read-react player, and he will need to kind of iron out some of his control overall as a tackler. He'll be very over-aggressive at times, and that can cause him to miss tackles and sometimes short arm tackles. Which was kind of surprising considering his length. He's He's got 32 and 5/8 inch arms. Like he's a long defender. So you have the physical profile, you have the athletic profile, you have the flashes there. That right there, that is a much better overall prospect than what DJ Johnson is coming out of Oregon. I mean, coming out of Oregon, DJ Johnson was a player I chose not to evaluate because I'm like, there's no way he's going to be a top 100 selection. I was more focusing last year on top 100, top 20 prospects, right, or somewhere around that range. I was shocked that Johnson went as high as he did. And to Carolina, I'm like, they panicked. They honestly panicked. They panicked to get a pass rusher. They needed one. They panicked instead of taking one earlier.
And then drafted up and then traded up to get him. I'm like,
it's bad process from the Scott Fitterer era. And some people were like, "Oh, this is another Scott Fitterer pick." No. The process is different here. I do think there was more deliberation and more conviction when it came to some of these players. I don't think there were any significant reaches. There weren't any picks that I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And like the last two selections that Carolina had in their draft class, like they made sense because they're going to be different. We'll talk about those guys later on, but Trevon Wallace, I think he's going to be a fine player for Carolina. I don't expect him to start year one. I do expect him to flash a little bit in coverage. I think you'll see him a little bit in third downs, especially if I think they expect him to be a third down linebacker for this team this year because Josie Jewell, I'm not the biggest fan of him when it comes to overall coverage drops, when it comes to deeper coverage drops. Because he doesn't have the best lateral mobility, but he's got enough to do just spot coverage drops. But if you ask him to go cover the flat, take the high hole, go take the hook curl a little bit deeper, I just don't think he has that lateral mobility and athleticism to do that. So, they did improve overall. The Carolina Panthers did improve overall run defense-wise, but I think they got a little bit better, or not better. I don't think that's the right word for it. I think they added someone that could benefit them on third downs and allow him to get playing time, and that's Trevon Wallace. And he's going to a good linebacker coach in Peter Hansen, who I think will be a future defensive coordinator down the line, especially with Jero Evero potentially in his final season as a defensive coordinator in Carolina. We have no idea how he's going to do for the next interview process. Depend on what teams are looking for, of course, who will be available in terms of head coach openings. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I was a fan of the Wallace pick. Like, as I watched more of his tape, I'm like, this pick makes a lot of sense, and I think he'll turn out well for Carolina.
Okay, because there was a notion that I saw floating around. Oh, the Panthers just spent a third round pick on a special teamers, and I just didn't get that vibe. Now, again, I didn't get the deep dive that you just explained, but just from what I read and some of the clips that I got a quick pick at, I just didn't get that vibe because I looked up his stats here. I saw that just last year alone, he had 5 sacks and 20 quarterback hits. So he's a guy that you send him, he's getting after the quarterback.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like, and I want to make sure I say this with respect because he's no longer here, but he kind of gave me some of them Frankie Louvu type of vibes early on. You know what I'm saying? And since I'm not saying that this is quote unquote Frankie Louvu's replacement production wise, what we just saw, but I feel like that with right coaching, that he can provide the same type of energy and effect that Frankie Louvu had, because Frankie Louvu could get after the quarterback too. You know, he was relatively unknown as well when he was with the Jets when we picked him up. So, you know, I'm just glad that with Wallace, I kind of see the plan of the future. Now, do you see him more as a Mike linebacker, correct, Jared?
Yes, I do think he'll be a Mike linebacker at the next level.
Okay, now in the nickel sub packages, you say you could probably see him on third down. Now, depending on which one we use, most of the time we're in 2 linebackers. I know sometimes when we do the 3-3-5, use the 30 front, it's 3 linebackers.
Yep.
Do you see Shaq possibly being in the middle and maybe Wallace outside? Like, do you see where he could possibly be a little bit of outside linebacker?
Yeah, I do. And where Wallace is going to be, I think he'll start off as like kind of like the middle Sam. Like he's not going to have a ton of responsibility placed on him early on. I don't think that will be the case. I do expect him to play on special teams plenty this season, but I think that's more just to get him playing time outside of the potential third downs he'll be playing. And I need Panther fans to understand Trevon Wallace will likely have a much, much bigger role on this team within the next couple of seasons, or at least by year 2. Year 1, he's a rookie. I'm not expecting my third round pick at linebacker to come in and be a dominant force from the get-go. That would be great, but is it realistic? I don't think so. I want to preface that it's important to temper the expectations again, and to make sure, hey, we understand that Wallace is a talented player. He's got the physical profile, the athletic profile, the flashes in coverage. He showed off at the Senior Bowl. Mm-hmm. I think these are some important things to understand, and especially as fans that may not have access to film, that's you use those examples. And Jim Nagy has been raving about Trevon Wallace all offseason, executive director of the Senior Bowl. That's a key voice to listen to, I think, and when it comes to Senior Bowl prospects. And I respect Jim Nagy. He's done a terrific job of growing the Senior Bowl into a very significant event of the draft cycle, to kick off the draft cycle at least, and get the excitement going for the NFL draft. And now juniors and underclassmen are allowed to participate at the Senior Bowl, which is huge. And Wallace was one of those underclassmen, and that was huge for him because there were plenty of questions coming into the Senior Bowl. Is he a better player in coverage than we think? He showed he was. There are flashes on tape that he can be a really solid coverage defender. So again, expect Wallace to be that third down linebacker, more of a Sam middle guy, who can develop into a Mike later on, down the line during his rookie contract. And right now he'll more likely be a special teams guy while also playing on third downs plenty. That's my year 1 expectation. I don't know what year 2 is going to hold, because I'd rather wait and see how year 1 goes. If year 1 goes how I expect it to go, like I was just talking about, then I would like to see him be a starter. I think that's the ultimate goal at the end of the day. But yeah, because I do like this Wallace pick.
Yeah, because I was also thinking, we got Shaq Thompson coming back, year 9 from an Achilles. And again, we'll get into our 7th round pick, who's also a linebacker that I kind of got a big crush on. We'll discuss him later as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely see this as a, hey, bring you under my wing, pour this knowledge into you that was poured into me by Kiki Lee and TD, and then I'm passing on to you. I can see him having that mentoring role to a guy like Wallace. So I'm definitely, I wasn't negative. I just was unsure because he was kind of like my who did we just draft type moment. But I appreciate you breaking it down and pointing out, pros and cons of him and how he could possibly fit. Now, let's move on to day 3 here. One of the players that I had mocked to the Panthers, multiple times in my mock drafts, even though he went a little bit later than what the mocks would allow me to take him. But my God, I'm really excited. But again, like you said, lower expectations. I get it, but we're talking about out of Texas. We're talking about, I think it's pronounced Jatavian Sanders.
Correct.
I believe that's how it is. Out of Texas. Man, this this guy's film gets you excited. And I think that with our tight end room. Now, you're talking about someone that's a big Tommy Tremble fan. I'm cool with Steven Sullivan. I think he can provide some things as well. I'm not so much anti-Ian Thomas like everybody else. I think Ian is a good blocker. I think that he can find a role, but everybody else wants to get him up out of here. But
if he doesn't have that passing down skill set that is adequate for this team right now. But I agree with you. Provides excellent value as a blocker. I think that's very important.
Yeah. But hey, with this guy and the different ways that the tight end can be used, because I have seen I think you call it the Y position.
Mm-hmm.
That I've seen Dave Canales, in film breakdown, not only back in Seattle when he was with Russell Wilson, but in Tampa last year as well. I'm excited about the type of role that he can play, and I hope that he will be one of the reasons why we may use a little bit more 12 personnel that I mentioned earlier as well, because I think him and Tommy Tremble will be a very nice 1-2 punch. They won't be guys you pick up in fantasy, but I believe those two could be like the silent killers, of an offense. You might only see 3 or 4 catches, but you might see 3 first downs or, something like that. It was a significance that they've done. So based on what you seen, and I know he was one of the guys that you had in your top 100, I believe, if I remember correctly. Tell me, what do you think about Ja'Tavion Sanders? And again, pros and cons and how he fits with us.
Yeah, so Sanders is one of the better tight ends in this draft class. I was slightly lower on him than the consensus. I had him as my tight end number 4 behind the likes of Ben Sinnott of Kansas State and Theo Johnson of Penn State. But I do like this pick overall. I think landing Sanders was best case scenario for Carolina, especially at the top of the 4th round. And to kick off day 3 of your draft with Ja'Tavion Sanders at a position of need, absolutely all in on that. You get a receiving threat, a true receiving threat at a position that needed it. And sure, Tommy Tremble could provide a more balanced skill set. I think he does. But what Sanders offers right now gives you potentially immediate production as a receiver. You're going to see him kind of used as more of a Swiss Army knife in some ways. You're going to see him used in motions. He has that. He has the athleticism and the fluidity to move as a motion guy. You'll sometimes see him lined up in the backfield. You may see him lined up at fullback sometimes, but more as a receiving threat at fullback. You'll see him lined up as an X receiver or even a Z, playing that flanker spot, or you'll see him as a big slot. I mean, they're going to utilize him in that type of way, in that type of role. I think Dave Canales has made it clear they want to use players to their strengths, and I expect that to be the case this season. And I think Sanders' strength, of course, is as a receiver. Yeah, he flashes great ball skills. He's good after the catch. He has good explosiveness after the catch as well. Like there are some things I would like to see him work on. Like he shows some willingness as a run blocker, but he's sub 250 and he's not going to have that overwhelming size to just dominate in the run game. Like you need to have him in space. You need to line him up a little bit, almost in a similar way that Jacksonville and the Giants have used Evan Ingram in the past. So I think overall as a blocker, he needs some work on, but as a receiver, he's fun. Good short area quickness and foot speed for a guy his size at 6'3", 245, and plenty of lateral agility and fluidity overall on his film. There's plenty of contact balance and space, being able to shed tacklers and continue to finish forward and run after catch situations. I think that's very important. He's shown to have good planting skills in terms of when he's breaking on in or out routes. And he has shown flashes to press stems and leverage defenders very well. this was a good pick for Carolina. I think this was probably one of their better value picks in this draft. And I know Dan Brugler of The Athletic had him as his number 2 tight end. And this was one of I think this was his favorite pick for Carolina's draft class overall, just because of how high he was on Sanders, but also the impact he could have in year 1. Again, tempering expectations. I'm not expecting him to have the most receiving yards by a Panthers tight end since Greg Olsen. I think Tommy Tremble will enter the season and will enter week 1 as the number 1 tight end. It wouldn't surprise me if Sanders was the number 1 tight end next year for Carolina, especially with Tremble being in a contract year. And if Tremble doesn't reach the expectations that some may have this upcoming season, former 5-star recruit out of Texas is going to end up being the starter next year and probably get more production down the line if the Panthers are in a position to potentially make a run at the division. But again, tempering expectations. Personally, I feel like about 6 to 7 wins is on the table for Carolina at the moment. But I like the Sanders pick. It's good value. It gives Carolina a receiving threat at a critical position, and it gives you another threat in RPO games, and especially down the seam if Carolina wants to run RPO and use that tight end as a potential seam threat on those RPOs.
Yeah, because one of the things I liked about Sanders, his ability to separate really stood out on film. Like, he would take short passes and, he would get upfield quickly. Not sure what his acceleration metrics came out to be, but he's someone that once he catches it in stride, he's skedaddling. He's definitely getting up out the way. So again, I think one of a quarterback's best friend is having a reliable tight end, and I do think, like you said, that Tremble enters year 1 potentially as tight end number 1. But I can see Sanders growing to that role as he gets used to, because with Canales' emphasis on running the ball, run blocking as a tight end is definitely going to be something that you're going to have to do to get significant reps in this offense. Even if we're, in a spread type formation, you still can run the ball, and definitely we need players that can on the edge that definitely can get those blocks. So definitely look forward to seeing, Sanders show what he can do now and grow and develop as well. Again, I'm real excited and looking at the possibilities that he can have. One last thing before we move on to the next player. So you kind of gave projections. What's a reasonable expectation as far as possible yards and touchdowns for him in the first year, would you say?
I'm going to say at least 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. I think that's very reasonable. And that's still productive for a rookie tight end, in my opinion. I think fans do tend to look at guys like Dalton Kincaid and Sam Laporta in their first years, or even TJ Hawkinson or Noah Fant in their first years. And they're like, oh, Sanders has to play like that in year 1. No. Year 1's about progression and development. If Sanders can play to that level, amazing. That is best case scenario. But again, there's going to be a learning curve. There's going to be adjusting to the speed of the NFL. There ain't no cons with this draft. They got some sorely needed firepower on offense. We can fix the defense next year where the talent is projected to be deep. That's a fair assessment. That's a fair take. Carolina did everything they needed to this offseason to put talent around Bryce. Upgraded the guard spots. Got depth at offensive tackle. Still a little iffy at center. Upgraded at receiver significantly. Added a receiving tight end through the draft. Added depth at tight end and running back. And also added a coach that is all in on Bryce, all in on his development. you couldn't ask for a better offseason on paper at this moment. Now, it won't matter if it doesn't translate on the field.
Exactly.
But right now, it looks good. And I'm glad it's going in this direction, because if Carolina wasn't going to surround Bryce with talent, it's another lost year for Bryce Young. And that's another year of potentially compromising development of number 9. There could be some struggles on defense this year, but I do expect the run defense to improve a lot.
Oh, definitely.
Significantly. And I think next year there'll be, assuming the offense takes a big step forward and the defense still plays at a steady level with improved run defense, I do expect them to go heavy on defense next year, especially at edge and at corner. Assuming JC Horn, knock on wood, he stays healthy. If he's unable to, good year next year for cornerback talent in the draft. Will Johnson, Travis Hunter. 2 dogs, Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame. There's going to be talent next year. Denzel Burke from Ohio State. There's a couple other Ohio State defensive backs too. Like that, next year is going to be a good year for draft wise. It'll be a good year for DBs. But moving on, and speaking of DBs, I think it's a good time to talk about Charles Smith.
5th round pick. Yeah, 5th round pick, Charles Smith-Wade, a name that I later on during the mock draft season I started looking him up. I know people don't want to talk about his size. I think 5'10". Not every cornerback in this league that's good is going to be 6'1", 6'2". Just from my quick observations, and again, I don't know how much you had done prior, had done any research on him, but
I did.
Jared, I like the fact. Oh, okay.
Yes.
What stuck out to me, Jared, was the fact that he does well in man coverage, both press and off the ball. That's one of the things that stuck out to me. The second thing was in the run game, he gets it. There is absolutely no fear with Mr. Smith-Wade here, coming out there with the off tackles, sweeps, toss plays, any of that. I like that. He's someone else that, to me, that dog theme that was out there, it's just like his film supports that he's going to be a dog. And I get it. Oh, man, it's a 5th round pick. Don't get no such expectations. But, again, just transitioning in, I think that this was a quality pick. And I still think that allows us to still reach out to Stephon Gilmore and bring him back in as well. I wouldn't be surprised if that's not done by the end of the week here. But overall, again, from what you gathered, what do you see with Mr. Smith-Wade here that you like?
So right after the draft Saturday, or actually in between, while the Panthers were making their 6th and 7th round selections, I was watching some of Smith-Wade's tape.
Okay.
Only a couple games in, I want to watch 2 more just so then I have enough film to kind of understand the player overall. But I have similar thoughts like you did. Let me pull up my notes real quick.
Sure.
So I haven't written down any cons. I was more just looking for like a baseline. Like, all right, what is he good at right now? Like you were mentioning, he plays with urgency downhill. He attacks downhill. He'll make plays against the run. But there are times, though, I did notice that he was missing tackles. I think that's just more to having a lack of length and having a much smaller frame than you want at the position. He has good zone cover skills, I think. Showed some discipline in that area. There were some spatial awareness issues that I noticed in the Oregon game. He's a nimble corner with fluid hips. He's not going to run stride for stride with the fastest receiver on the field, but he'll show some discipline, especially in off man and in zone coverage when he's passing off defenders in transition, and also when he's able to stay patient in his back pedal working in off man. So I did like the flashes I saw. he missed the final 5 games of this past season due to a sprained AC joint in his shoulder. And also he was on Pac-12 in 2022. Former 3-star recruit, redshirt junior. There's talent here with Smith-Wade, and I saw Mike K, or it was either Mike K, and I watched the podcast the other day with you and Mike K, and that was great stuff, man. I really enjoyed watching you guys talking with Mike. Got some good info from Mike, who's a great dude. And if I remember correctly, he mentioned that Smith-Wade may compete for nickel reps this upcoming season. I expect him to make the roster. I'd be shocked if he didn't. But if he, I don't expect him not to make the roster.
Right.
So I do hope that Smith-Wade can be a contributor defensively this upcoming season. And if not, that's okay. I do believe that I think best case scenario, he ends up starting at nickel in year 2.
Okay.
If he can develop quickly. But that's an if. That's a big if. I do expect him to provide depth, and also I think this is a clear sign that Carolina still has significant interest in Stephon Gilmore. And I tweeted this out the other day, and I'll stand by it today. Panthers should sign Stephon Gilmore yesterday. I mean, I think we're at the sure, they may take their time. They may just kind of reset a little bit post-draft, trying to get back under their feet. But I do expect Carolina to sign Gilmore at some point over the next couple of weeks. It might be at the end of the week. It might be in the next 30 minutes. It might be who knows when. But I would love to see Gilmore back at Carolina. He'd provide a good boost for the secondary. And you're going to get a player that's not the same elite player he once was, but you're still getting a good cornerback that can provide for this defense in Evero's defense. I think he's going to love playing for Evero. I know Jeff R said something about they're going to lose Evero anyway. No need to put too much into the defense this year. The new DC will want to draft his own defensive players, build the offense, and I agree. And also Vietnam, not to mention that next year we will have all of our picks and a ton of money for free agency. I will push back on having a ton of money, quote unquote.
Right.
The current projections right now from Over the Caps show that the Panthers in 2025 will have just over $40 million in cap space.
Okay.
And of course, that can go up with more restructuring and cutting players, stuff like that. But right now it's at 40 million. More just so because of all the contracts that are going to be cycling through, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that will probably go down next year, or it might stay the same depending on what the Panthers do with Stephon Gilmore in their camp. But yeah, that got a little bit of a tidbit there for Panther fans that may not know fully of the cap situation for next year. That's the current projection from Over the Cap is just over 40 million.
Okay. Now, just one quick thing here before we move on to the 6th round pick. You brought up talking about competition with Smith-Wade, possibly at nickel. What about last year's 5th round pick, Jamie Robinson? Do you see him as possible someone that can compete for nickel? Because right now I think it's Troy Hill. Now I see Robinson as more, he could play some nickel, but he seems more like a safety to me than like a big nickel type versus your regular slot nickel. I know we're talking about draft, but just real quick, what kind of role you see Jamie Robinson possibly, having a say with this secondary, rotation?
Safety, big slot, like you were saying. I think he's more of a big slot at the next level, but I definitely see him competing for reps at nickel. I would expect there to be more of an open competition at nickel this year. I think just maybe overall across the board, you're going to see competition. But I think at nickel, where if there's even if there's like a slight bit of like maybe Hill might not even be the starting nickel this upcoming season, there's going to be competition. And he's an older player. He's 33 years old. He's not getting any younger, but he still played well this past season for Carolina and nickel. And I think he was probably one of the better nickels last year, but you don't know how age will affect a player this upcoming season. And I think having that extra insurance with Smith-Wade and potentially Jamie Robinson, I think that would be helpful for Hill, but also helpful for Evero overall.
All right. Well, I definitely appreciate that insight here. So, Jerry, we're going to move on to the 6th-round pick here. Didn't know if you saw it. I was involved in a live mock draft with Panthers on Tap Wednesday. And I mentioned this guy as a possibility for the Panthers. And lo and behold, he ended up getting drafted. We're talking about 6th-round pick, defensive tackle, Jaden Crumedy. It's pronounced Crumedy? Crumedy. Okay, thanks for that. Mississippi State, 6'4", 300 pounds. Here, he was someone that, from the very little that I watched, and I like to be fair, I didn't. This was somebody that I spent a ton of time, watching pre-draft. I kind of like to do my film watching after the draft, so I can focus squarely since I know what we're looking at here. But he's someone that actually spent 6 years at Mississippi State. So he definitely got a lot of playing time, a lot of reps. One of the things that stood out to me, athleticism. I can see him playing anywhere from a 3 technique to a 7. So I can see him shifting, in different fronts. Here, I see someone that can observe double teams here, and just kind of those were my initial impressions. Give me your point of view on what you know about him.
So, just as a disclaimer, I didn't get the chance to evaluate both Jaden Crumedy and also Michael Barrett. But from what I've seen in preliminary stuff, just about what you were saying, ability to take on double teams, showing some gap integrity, showing good power at the point of attack, just some of those little things. I'll go ahead and kind of share what Dan Brugler said about Jaden Crumedy. So he had Crumedy as a late 5th, early 6th round selection. And here's what he had to say overall as an overall summary. Overall, Crumedy's tape is more sporadic than consistent, but if you grade the flashes, not many 300-pounders with his athletic movements and power potential, which will keep him around if his fire stays lit, projects as a rotational 3 technique in a 4-3 or a 5 tech in odd front. So you'll see him in the 5 tech. I don't think he's going to be your nose tackle. I don't think Carolina's going to have a true nose tackle this year, unfortunately. But I do think you're going to see him a little bit in some rotations. Defensively, there will be competition behind Derek Brown and Ashawn Robinson. I don't think LeBron Ray's spot on the roster is guaranteed. I think Crumedy does offer a good athletic and physical profile to build off of. He's not going to be your future star at 5 tech. He's not going to be that type of player. He's an older prospect. He's going to be 24 years old before training camp, or he'll be turning 24 before training camp. And he didn't have above average production in any of his years. So kind of have the production, kind of his game log per se on Brugler's report. He was in the class of 2018, which I was a junior in high school at that time. Or actually, no, I was a senior in high school. That's my bad. Senior in high school when Jaden Crumedy enrolled at Mississippi State in May 2018, missed 2 games in 2019 due to injury. Of course, the pandemic shortened season. missed the first 8 games of 2022 with a wrist injury. So he had, of course, the redshirt year plus extra year for COVID, which all players that were participants in the NCAA or any student athlete in the NCAA received an extra year of eligibility. So you're seeing all these 5th year and 6th year seniors popping up in this draft this year, as well as potentially next year and the year after that. But with Crumedy, the athletic profile is there, 6'3", 301, 4.97 40-yard dash. He can move a little bit. He had a 1.69 10-yard split, which is quite explosive. Not elite explosiveness, but it's plenty explosive. Crumedy, I think, will be in the rotation. I want to see the film for myself overall. Want to get my own formal opinion on Crumedy, but just from what I've seen preliminary and what I've heard from others, and Dan Brugler is the guy I trust the most when it comes to player evaluations this deep in the draft. It is a player that it's going to be depth. It's a depth pick. I'm not expecting him to be a starter. I don't think any Panther fan should expect him to be a starter, but he's going to provide some rotation potentially at 5-tech, 4-eye, and he's going to give you someone to develop on the back end.
Okay, that's fair, because I definitely feel like, with us running a base 30 front, but certain sub packages would be 40 front. I definitely think that he can definitely get into that rotation. I just think that his value would be as a run stopper. So I know he's not going to put up any kind of sexy stats, as no defensive lineman typically does as a vast majority. But, the fact that he absorbs double teams and athletic and can, disengage blocks, that's just something that kind of pointed out to me as well. So, again, a rotational piece that can play different spots. Hey, in this late in the draft, if you can find 1 or 2 things about him that'll benefit, hey, that's a win in my book.
Yep.
So let me get to this last pick here, and I'm gonna shock you with this one, because this took place while you was talking about Jatavian Sanders here. I actually just got followed by the father of our 7th round pick, Michael Barrett Sr.
Very nice.
Because I did a tweet asking, guys, hey, Michigan fans, Big Ten fans, give me the spiel on, what type of player we're getting here with Michael Barrett. And, people were saying different things. And just to let you know what his dad said here on my tweet, he said, humble with the heart of a lion, thrives in the underdog road, give him a chance, praying hands, 100 football emojis. So I immediately gave him a follow back, and then I just did a quote tweet asking Panther fans to pick him up. So whenever you get a chance, definitely give him a follow as well. It's always good to, rock with the parents of Panther players, things like that.
Yep.
But man, I can be honest, I haven't been this excited about a 7th round pick in a while, Jared. As someone that was, don't get me wrong, I'm not a Michigan Wolverine fan. I'm all about my Tar Heels, but watching Michigan, their games, was usually on Saturdays. And of course, I always watched the Big Ten championship, and of course, they was in the playoffs. He's someone that stuck out a lot on tape. I mean, we're talking about another, 6-year senior. Now he's only 5'11", but he's a thick, solid, athletic 5'11". He's like, I think he's like 235 pounds, I believe he is.
Yep.
And he's just someone that he can move, he can cover, he can, pop. So immediately I started thinking, depth piece here. And again, since you prefaced me telling me you didn't really do about, so I'm just going to read a few pointers here off the Draft Network. This was done by Brentley Wiseman on the Draft Network. Size 5'11", 233 pounds, arm length 32 1/8, hand size 8 1/2. He made all Big Ten both in 2022 and 2023. It says Michael Barrett is a rangy second level defender who has above average size, athleticism and instincts to affect the game in both phases. Quickly, it says the strengths here is his strength is in coverage, tackling, and range. Concern is instincts and length. Uh, Pretty much kind of sums up what I kind of got a glimpse of, because I went back and watched the Ohio State game because it's a big rivalry. I always like to see how you do against the guys you hate the most, and then I look back, some of his play during the BCS playoffs as well. I like this guy. I can see him being one of the Panthers that stick around, and people be like, "Wow, he made it!" Like, yeah, man. Like you can jump on me, Jared, if you need to, but I could see Wallace and Barrett being the future, Panther tandem moving forward, with this class. I know it's a long shot. I know people like 7th round pick, but man, you talking about somebody with a motor. This guy goes after it. Like I haven't watched enough, but he doesn't seem someone that really take plays off, and he goes hard.
Yeah, some of the tape that I saw, well, more just like on the side in terms of just watching Michigan defenders. Barrett stood out in plenty of ways. Of course, showed plenty of range, showed athleticism, showed a high motor, showed physicality in the trenches, and especially in the run game. I think Dan Morgan has a type in terms of the type of linebacker he likes, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I do think that Morgan wanted to add a little bit more depth because I still think the depth was lacking even after the Wallace selection. So I don't think it's a terrible thing to double dip at linebacker. I do understand that, they could have added another playmaker in day 3. This pick could have been Jalen Coker. Who knows? But I do think that one thing I've come to know about day 3 is that after probably around the 5th or 6th, around the 5th round, it will be more of a scouts draft. This is going to be the time where scouts will be pounding the table. And I think when you have someone like Barrett, I think I can see why a scout may like him, especially someone on Carolina's staff. And when Morgan, who has probably watched more tape than I have, of course, when you have a player like Barrett who has that type of profile that's draftable, that's someone you can develop on the practice squad or even as your linebacker depth overall. I'm curious how that's going to work out. I would like to go into his film and do a deep dive myself and have a better formal opinion. But it sounds like the type of player that Morgan would be interested in. What's going on, Tyree? I overall with this Panthers class, I do wish they could have added another playmaker at least, especially at wide receiver. But I do think Jalen Coker might have a chance of making the final 53 potentially. But again, us Panther fans tend to fall in love with an undrafted free agent in hopes of him making the roster, like Rashawn Wright from last year because of the Dante Jackson stuff. Right. Last year, Kieris Garrett comes to mind. I know that's a throwback name from about, 10 years ago, 10, 15, not 10, not 15, probably 9 to 10 years ago.
What about the one from Clemson, the linebacker Boware? That was supposed to be
Ben Boware. That's my guy. That's my guy. But hey, man, the odds of him making that final 53 were low. But that's the closest thing the Panthers or Panther fans have gotten to seeing a Clemson player get drafted. And once again, this year continues the streak of no Clemson players drafted by the second closest team to them. And of course, Atlanta, I think it's just because of much closer proximity between Atlanta and Clemson. I think that's why you see a little bit more Clemson talent go to Atlanta. But also, I think there's plenty of talent from the Atlanta area that end up getting recruited in Clemson, but little ramble there. I like the depth added defensively, at depth at corner, at depth at defensive line, at depth at linebacker overall. You add playmakers around Bryce Young. That's a solid draft. Could it be better? Sure. Right. But is this the best they could do? Probably. And I'm not. I like to see how this draft turns out. I hope this is finally the year the Panthers nail on some of these day 2, day 3 selections. I think there's a good chance that ends up being the case. Especially with Brooks and Wallace, 2 players I like, and also Jadavian Sanders. I think that could end up being a really solid day 3 selection for Carolina down the road.
Yeah, I definitely think, Def could be potentially as well. Like I said, you did a great job of emphasizing, kind of leverage expectations, but there's definitely, reasons to be optimistic here. I'm definitely interested in seeing, because I've said all along, Jared, because I had been, beaten up by the previous 2 coaches that we had that I wasn't
that we shall not name.
Right. That's why I didn't even go there. I just because I'm always the most optimistic one of the 4-man rush. I was looking for the silver lining. Always thinking about, this will be the reason why we'll have a winning record this year. Blah 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 blah.
Hey.
I'm
cautiously optimistic.
Optimistic, yes.
Yeah.
That's where my stance. Even though I like this class, I won't say I love it because I don't want to, get hyped up. Even when training camp and preseason come around, I've been suckered by that too. I'm thinking, dang, he looked good in training camp or preseason, and then goes out there and lays an egg during the season. So I'm just going to be in wait and see mode.
Yep.
If you do good, I'll give you props. If you play like crap, what I'm saying, I'll criticize you with fairness, and then we'll just go from there.
Absolutely. And I was on the same. I think a lot of Panther fans were, and you and I were on the same boat too. When I was on the 4-Man Rush podcast last summer, we were all on the same boat. We were expecting, hey, this could be a really good season for Carolina. Much better season than we anticipated. I think we were kind of blinded by the fact of too many cooks in the kitchen, as well as believing that DJ Chark and Jonathan Mingo and Adam Thielen and
Terrence
Marshall Jr. could all come in. Like, it would be a good rotational, great for Bryce. This is going to be good for him. All these cooks, all these solid, okay weapons, but you don't really need the true playmakers. But then I think it was a good lesson for all of us that the team needed much better talent. And Panthers did a great job of adding that this offseason, and I got to give them props for that. Now, will it translate? We'll wait and see. But it's hard for me to imagine that when you upgrade from below average talent to at least above average talent, that you're not going to see improvement from Bryce. I think we saw the flashes. And I'll bring up, of course, the Green Bay game, for example. Fans will be like, oh, it was against Joe Barry's defense. It was a bad defense.
Right.
Who cares? Who cares if it was the best defense in the world or the worst defense in the world? You play like that at any level, that's a great day. And that shows me that Carolina has their quarterback of the future. I'm really excited for that.
Right. Yeah, I'm definitely too. And I brought this up as we get to wrap this up here, Jared. Panther fans may be curious and want to know what's up next since the draft. So the OTA offseason workouts, they're going to begin now that we're in the month of May, today being May 1st. OTA workouts, offseason workouts start May 20th, 21st, May 23rd, May 28th, 29th, May 31st, June 3rd and 4th, and June 6th. Wrap it up with a 3-day mandatory minicamp, June 11th through the 13th. And then off 6 weeks until it's time for training camp, which, it's going to be in Charlotte. I'm curious to see how
I'll be there.
How that sets up and everything. I'm thinking it's going to be at the Bubble, right?
The Bubble is no longer. They torn that thing down. I think they're going to. So it seems like they're going to add another practice field or two, but they're also going to add grandstands probably to like each end of each end zone, or I'm not sure how it's going to work entirely, but I do expect there to be like grandstands so then fans can attend. I'll be curious to see how that turns out. It does seem like it's going to be limited like fan attendance though. Like you're going to have to get like a ticket or something. There will be like limited tickets available or something like that. So trust me, I'll be there. I'll definitely be there no matter what. I mean, it's going to be a 10-15 minute drive for me from where I live in Charlotte. So I could take an Uber and enjoy my day in Uptown and then walk over to the Panthers facility, watch Panthers practice. So looking forward to training camp here in Charlotte. I'm going to miss it being in Walford. I do hope it returns to Walford at some point, but yeah, I as a new Charlotte resident, I'd like to enjoy being in closer to my location than I'm used to.
Sorry about that. My mic got stuck here.
Good.
Yeah, and another thing that's coming up here that we all going to be looking forward to is the 2024 NFL schedule release. Now, last year I already looked it up. It came on May 11th, so it's typically the second week in May that it usually comes out full week, rather. So, it could come out maybe sometime next week, but with the schedule, because next Wednesday is the 8th, so that could possibly be in play. It's usually done in the middle of the week here, so I think that allowed Panther fans to get an idea what tickets they want, where they want to travel. I'm hearing rumors, of us possibly playing the Giants in Germany here, because this is the year that we get 9 home games, and the Giants is one of our home games here. So that could be. We just have to see how the schedule play out. I think we got the NFC East and the AFC West that we're playing. This time around. So it
might be. I think it might be the NFC West, maybe.
No, because we're playing Kansas City. We're at the Raiders.
We are playing the AFC West. I'm not sure if we're playing. I think we're playing the NFC West as well. It might be both West divisions.
No, it's the East, because I'm looking at it right here. It says we're playing the Eagles, Giants, Cowboys, and Commanders this year.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So,
gotcha.
Yeah. Hey, but Jared, I mean, a reason to go to Vegas. Now we got one. Well, you're this weekend. Covering the Panthers. Oh, cool. Where you going? Las Vegas.
I'm more there for just the football. I'm not too big into all the other stuff in Vegas, but it'd be awesome to be in Vegas either way.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, Jared, man, I appreciate you taking up all this time. We've been on a little over an hour and a half, looking at an hour 38 exactly. Oh man, once again, man, you're the one of the reasons why you're a favorite of ours to follow on Twitter. Your breakdown, your ability to explain things in a way that makes sense for those of us that have the basic common football one-on-one logic and knowledge. So we are able to follow along with you. Thank you again for taking time out of your schedule to join us here at the 4-Man Rush to give us your opinion and insight on why these players were drafted and how they can fit, what kind of role they play. So definitely appreciate it. I give you a chance at the end here, because we got 296 eyes on us. Let the fans know exactly where it is again that they can find you follow you on social media.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter or X at JRod NFL Drafts. It's the same handle on Threads, the Instagram version of Twitter. which I use somewhat frequently. You can also find my written content over at Cat Crave and Rigo's Rag covering the Carolina Panthers and the Washington Commanders. But trust me, I do a lot more Cat Crave content than I do Commanders content because I have a deep love for the Carolina Panthers, no matter how good or bad. But I'm really excited to get the chance to write more content this summer and get more opportunities down the line. So, yeah, I would love to see maybe Carolina and KC playing against each other in Germany. That could be interesting. Bryce Young versus Patrick Mahomes in Munich, Germany. That'll be fun.
Right. Well, hey, like I said, within the next 2 weeks when that schedule drop, it should be good. And it's always the Panthers. The Panthers staff does a great job of the how they do the schedule release. The last few schedule releases have been nothing but amazing, hilarious, and fun. So I know they got something cooking up, and I can't wait.
Oh, for sure. Yep. Absolutely.
All right. Well, again, thanks for stopping by, Jared, and we'll definitely hook up again. Possibly, right before training camp starts, if anything breaks. Of course, we'll always keep in touch with you on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Again, thank you for coming by. And again, on behalf of everybody here at the 4-Man Rush, I just want to thank all of our fans for stopping by and listening today. Definitely had a great time. You can, I'm going to post a link later. You can also go back, and I'm going to tag you, Jared, and post a link of our podcast today that you can follow along and, watch again for those that came in late. You definitely can get Jared's full analysis on all of our draft picks here as well. But again, Jared, thanks to you again. Catch you later on. And to all of our fans, and to all of our fans, stay safe out there. Stay cool because the sun is starting to cook a little bit. And definitely stay hydrated. Again, this is Kevin Avery, a.k.a. 4MR_Country Kev, of the 4-Man Rush. Let's keep pounding. You guys take care.